What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
I wasn't in the United States in the late 60s. From 1966 to 1967, I was in Dublin, Ireland, attending Trinity College. And while I was there, I would listen to Irish and British broadcasts on the radio and meet students of all different nationalities, and all of them were criticizing what the US was doing in Vietnam. And that was the first time I had heard Americans being called imperialists. It came as quite a shock to me. I had been rather sheltered up until then, and I didn't realize that not everyone loved America and what we were doing. The following year, I took a year off from college and went to work in Paris, France. I wanted to improve my French, and so I got a job in an advertising agency as a secretary, and I needed a place to live. So I looked at the Herald Tribune, the International Herald Tribune, which today is called the New York Times Global Edition, but at that time it was a very local Paris paper, and I found a little ad of a French woman who was looking for a flatmate. So I called her up, and she said, come on over and look at the apartment. And I guess even though I was only 22 and she must have been about 37, I think she liked me enough. Or maybe it was my dollars she liked, because the dollar was quite high at the time. This is what happened. After she said I could have the apartment, Hilary, my name is Hilary, but that's how she pronounced it. Hilary, vous allez prendre la chambre, moi je vais me coucher dans le salon, et puis la deuxième chambre, c'est maintenant la salle à manger, et c'est pourquoi j'invite mes amis à dîner. How French, I thought. She's sleeping on the sofa in the living room and making the second bedroom, which is the largest room in the whole apartment, into a dining room, putting in a huge mahogany table and red satin material on the walls for her occasional dinner parties. Now, Marie-Christine, I'm saying it in the French way. In America, you would probably say Marie-Christine, but Marie-Christine was an aristocrat. And I knew that because she had de in her name. If you know that when you have de in a French name, it usually means you're an aristocrat. But Marie-Christine was doubly de. She had two de. Her name was Marie-Christine de Mons de Savas. Marie-Christine of Mons and of Savas. And her family were very traditional Catholics. And at that time, it meant that they would only go to Mass when it was said in Latin, not in French. They were also ultra-conservative and had even supported Pétain and the Vichy government during World War II. They hated de Gaulle. They were landowners from the southern part of France and had vineyards. And Marie-Christine was very surprised that my father and his family, we all lived from my father's monthly salary and not from revenue from property or inheritance. Poor Marie-Christine, she was in a bit of a bind. She was 37 and desperate to get married, but in fact she never did. And this was because the aristocratic men of her class and status were not financially well off, and were looking for rich, bourgeois, upper-class women. And Marie-Christine, being an aristocrat and a poor one, didn't interest them. Well, Marie-Christine and I had our political differences and other differences, but we really got on quite well. She was very kind to me, and thanks to her, I learned how to cook French food. And her specialty was pommes dauphinoises, which are scalloped potatoes, which I can still make till to today. And also, it was during that time, that 1 year when I was living in her apartment, that I woke up one morning and I said, Marie-Christine, j'ai rêvé en français. Marie-Christine, I dreamt in French. One day, while I was living there, I came back to the apartment. Hilary, qu'est-ce que vous avez? What's wrong? Your eyes, they are all red. What has happened? I was down in the Latin Quarter, Marie-Christine. I was looking at the student demonstration on the corner of Boulevard Saint-Michel and Boulevard Saint-Germain. You wouldn't believe what I saw. Hilary, what are you doing down there? You are not a student. I know, Marie-Christine, I'm not a student, but it was fascinating. I saw so many things down there, but it was awful too. All those riot police chasing after the students with their helmets and their shields and their batons, and pulling the students by their hair and tying them up and throwing them into paddy wagons. It was just terrible. Serve them right, she said. They're all anarchists and delinquents. I saw them on the TV. They were pulling up cobblestones from the streets and throwing them at the police and turning over cars and burning them. Marie-Christine, well, maybe some of them are anarchists, the ones from Nanterre University, but I don't think they're all delinquents. They're students. They're really upset. They want to change the establishment. They want to change the educational system, and they want to support the workers. You see, it was May 1968, and that was the time of the bloody student riots in Paris. It had all started 2 months before, in March, at Nanterre University, which was outside of Paris. A very politicized university where many of the professors, yes, they were communists, maybe anarchists, maybe Maoists, but they had a following of certain students, and there were sit-ins and demonstrations up to the point where the authorities, which is the French government, because most French universities are public, closed down the university. Well, this led to huge demonstrations in the Sorbonne, in the center of Paris. And there were hundreds and hundreds of arrests, police brutality. They were joined by the workers. The workers and the students built barricades. The scenes that I witnessed down in the Latin Quarter were very, very common. And it spread and spread and spread, this movement, so that thousands and thousands of people from all over France came to Paris, marched in the streets, demonstrated, and this grew and grew and grew. It was joined by the workers, it was joined by intellectual artists, writers like Jean-Paul Sartre, and it got so big, because the labor unions were now implicated in this, that there was a general strike. There was no electricity, there were no telephones, there was no public transportation, there was little food on the shelves of the supermarkets. It was very, very scary. But for somebody like me, a 22-year-old, I also thought it was rather exciting. And I even remember that my office was only open from 10 to 4, because remember, there was no electricity. We had to be able to see. So they would open from 10 to 4, but there was no transportation to get to work. So people would walk from all over. But I lived quite far from the office, so I put out my thumb and hitchhiked. And everybody was doing it, but for me it was the first time I'd ever done that. And you met all these interesting people, and everybody was talking about this situation. It was really very, very exciting. But let's get back to that day I came back to the apartment. Hilary, why do you get involved? I'm not getting involved, Marie-Christine. I just wanted to see what was happening. And you know, on the barricades, I actually saw Jean-Paul Sartre. He said, Jean-Paul Sartre, that communist, he wants the workers to take over the factories. And as for the students in the Sorbonne, the Sorbonne was good enough for my parents, it was good enough for me, it should be good enough for them. And if there is change, it shouldn't be coming like this. It should be coming slowly. But my Christine, things have got to change. There's all sorts of change in the air. They want to change the educational system. They want to change the class structure. They want to change the employment, the way people are hired and fired. We want more participation. And then I said, oh, I forgot something that I really very important, because she said, well, it's all your fault, she said. Everything that's bad always comes to France. Everything that's bad in America always comes to France several years later. And I remember, and I'm sure these students have seen it, I remember those demonstrations they had back in Berkeley in 1964, and it's free speech, free love. That shouldn't be here in France. But my Christine, it's happening all over the world. Things have to be more democratic. Things shouldn't change fast, she said. But my Christine, I think things are going to have to change after what I saw in the Latin Quarter. People say it's a revolution. Revolution? We already had one of those. That was back in 1789, and that was enough. If France still had a king, we wouldn't be having all these problems.